powerful panel here. You could see, I think, collective experience is more than 200 or 250 years. Everyone is highly experienced and also 3 doctorates. It's really, I am now, getting nervous to start this. It's really wonderful having such kind of experts. So what I would like to know, of course, everybody has heard whatever Mr. Rao has presented. We would like to start with you itself, that, see, we are talking about performance-based fire codes. How do you, differ? Asset and RSET is one thing which you have talked about, but when you talk about the materials and other things with respect to prescriptive codes and performance-based codes, what are all the other things which we need to consider, other than the while doing the modeling or whatever it is?
Yeah, I think before I give the answer to that, I think there's a few other bits we really need to think about. The modeling you see here, what I put up today, the structure modeling, the evacuation and the CFD modeling, is all done by people that have extensive knowledge in engineering or science background, or have been involved in research. Research being the key thing here on the performance-based design. The more you invest in the research, the more you learn. And we learn from past history as well. That's the key thing. So the past history, the engineering and the science, it gives you that performance-based design. The prescriptive codes are based on, they're very reactive. They're based on disasters or scenarios that happen, and then we apply these. And sometimes I wish they were more justified in a way. The code base, anybody could pick the codes up and actually apply it. Not everyone, but most people can apply it. But a performance-based design is true engineering. That's why I call myself an engineer. And being an engineer, we should be proud. That's what I say. Does that answer your question?
Not totally, but anyway, I'll come back to you. Probably I would not have framed my question properly. I'll come back to you again. Mr. Mukesh, I just wanted to ask you, because you also have been working outside India. So how do you find the difference between the various codes, like US or UK or Middle East or India, whatever it is?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, and I often, have this question from my peers and family members even, when you see, that...
Louder or take...
Okay. So when I have, worked on experiences in projects in which we have followed an FPA from US standards, and we have followed some UK-based standard, as just explained by Mr. Raj. And some countries, like in Middle East, they have their own standards, which is, in some cases, copied or, most of their entire thing is been either from an FPA or from IBC. So in short, if you talk about performance-based approach, so NFPA is very flexible. It gives you a statement at the start of any standard that you open that if you can meet the intent of this document by any other means, and which is accepted to the authority having jurisdiction. This is the one statement. And that opens door to feel your freedom, do whatever you want, right? So that's wonderful thing. I love that way. When you go to UK, as Raj explained, we don't have a standard way of doing things in a performance-based. You have to literally choose every project case-by-case basis, what you actually want to do, then follow some guidance from various standards. We have a standard, I think, almost for every single thing. We have hundreds of standards. Then you can choose and pick some requirement which suits your project, then apply your engineering analysis skills, then do usually CFD or FEA or similar techniques, and then you can come with a solution. If you think about in Middle East, this is in between. So mostly the fire services or the authorities, they don't love the performance-based approach for main reason because this puts them under immense pressure for approving something which they are not fully confident of. Right. Because,
that is a challenge.
That's a challenge. I want to talk about that challenge a bit more maybe after this round.
Okay.
So, but it is in between. They try to tell you that follow the prescriptive as much as you can. If there's no absolutely mean that you can meet them, then we are okay with the performance based, but then it has to be weighted by a minimum 2 consultants. The
Okay.
manpower consultant, then a reviewer. So we share the risk on the table. So then it's somehow been done. So this is
Okay.
how I seen like in different words of the, in part of words.
But in India, we look at only prescriptive.
I was
codes,
gonna
that's
say that like we are very early. So see, this is a it's like a very complicated matter of using a performance-based solution. We have to take a first small step, which is to start making a fire strategy for each and single project. It's no matter how small is your project, could be like one villa, you still need a fire strategy. Could be just 2 pages of document which states what the purpose is, what standard you are using, and what you want to achieve in terms of the safety. And I also want to clarify one thing on, we always like think about fire is for the people's safety. That's one key goal. But when you go to the complex project like mall or this exhibition center, airport, we have other interest as well. We want to protect the property. We want to continue with our, say, operation or businesses. If you think about airport or data center, they have enormous risk of losing those assets. They lose the asset, they lose their reputation, their money, and everything else. So
Downtime is very expensive also in
so
data
that's what I'm
centers.
saying. So we should not only be looking from the life perspective. We have to look. I mean, that's the first and most important thing. But the business continuity, property protection, continuous operation is nowadays being a key with this client, because we have seen these fires in airports and metro station, and they were closed for serious amount of time. And it's not easy to close such a massive investment,
Right.
So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Can I just
yeah.
add to that? The performance-based design doesn't mean we always cut costs or cut the actual protection or reduce the protection. It's actually challenging the norm. The norm being, for example, this building, we got sprinklers up there. We're 20 meters ahead? Will their sprinklers actually activate in the fire? I don't think so. That's what I mean, challenging the norm. Why put something up there when it's never going to work, or it's going to be inundated with the fire? Because they won't react. So that is challenging the norm. And I think as an industry, we need to change and embrace change. So we need to move forward rather than looking back. This is what we used to do 20 years ago. Well, this is what we did 30 years ago. We need to embrace the change and move forward and use these technologies we have now to go forward in these designs. Otherwise, we're never going to create innovative buildings and delightful shopping malls and things. They're going to be all boxes at the end of the day.
Yeah, thank you, Rao. It's a good explanation. Dr. Munirajulu, what I just wanted to know from you is, you have been practicing a lot of different kind of projects in the country. What kind of projects? I was just talking about warehouses or this kind of convention centers are one of the things. But which are all the areas where you find implementation using the performance codes is a challenge?
Thank you, Mr. Srinivas and the FSAI team. And also it's great to be among this eminent panel and all of you. The traditional approach is, as you have seen already, is a prescriptive approach based on the codes. In India, we mostly follow NBC and the local, government bylaws for the buildings. But the codal requirements are not always suitable to apply in certain cases. Especially modern buildings, have complex design and the architectural constraints. And that is where the performance-based design has to be adopted. And in L&T construction, we have been extensively using the performance-based design for such projects. And some of the projects where it was a challenge to apply the code as such, I will just give maybe 2 or 3 cases. And one of them is a building, the nature and the use of it. For example, nature and the use of it. And for example, let's take the airport, passenger terminal building. And NBC code says that every 2,000 square meter has to be fire compartmented. But then, it's not practical from the use point of view. Then, what is option? So we have to turn to the performance-based design. the goal is life safety, and as long as you are able to achieve the life safety in terms of meeting the performance objectives, in terms of tenable conditions, and that is where I think performance-based design becomes useful. And another scenario is we have a mixed occupancy type building. You have office tower in the building, and then you have a shopping mall also in the building. And then as per NBC code, you have to provide separate staircases for fire escape. Even though the building is same,
Yeah.
then it's a unique situation. So how do you address it? So that is where we have to adopt the performance-based egress analysis. And the architectural design is such that the staircases are interlinked. So you cannot provide separate staircases for retail occupancy and separate staircases for the business occupancy. So that is where we perform the performance-based egress analysis and then design the staircase, a good design. So that is how we.
But was it accepted by the department, I hope?
Yeah.
Because ultimately, if you do that analysis,
Yeah.
because again,
Yeah.
the code talks about these things. So anyway, that we'll discuss separately.
Yeah, it's a
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Sir, Mr. Ajay, question to you. What will be the challenges? Suppose, if we also try to adopt, he has already talked about some kind of, issues related to approval of these reports and other things. But the thing is, in our code, we are only talking about prescriptive approach. The performance-based codes, like this kind of projects, suppose, for example, and airports. So I think some of these occupancies, warehouses and other things may have to look in a different way. Is there any challenge in looking at that kind of approach, or what needs to be done when we talk about the NBC, basically?
Say two things. One is, let me clarify what this performance-based design we are talking about. And I am a bit confused the way this norm is
I
used
want you for
also.
that in this.
Yeah, nomenclature is being used. It is not performance-based. I think RAB tests this point, and it is fire performance-based.
Performance.
So, moment you say it is performance-based,
Fire
that
safety.
it gives an idea that the prescriptive codes are giving non-performance.
Not like that. Not like that. Wherever,
So it is fire performance. Now that is the clue that we can take. What are the challenges? Now the biggest problem is that we cannot freeze the data for a particular building to arrive at a decision that this is going to be the fire scenario. Now, when you get the plans at the initial stages, you give the in-principle approval, then you have only the four walls of the building and then some partitioning, and without any layout for the furniture or anything. That is the first approval that you give.
correct.
Second approval you give when some changes have been made to the plan. And third stage of change comes when the building has been occupied. And fourth stage is when the building is being modified to suit to individual's requirement.
Right.
Now, you cannot characterize a fire under these four changing conditions. That is the biggest challenge. If I could freeze the fire scenario, then perhaps the prescriptive code or the performance-based code both will have the same end results. There is no second thought. In prescriptive code also, these designs have been finalized based on these studies on which these softwares have been developed. So I would not take that theory that this is something different than what we have.
So you
been
mean to
doing.
say every building after, doing that kind of analysis only, this has been adopted, more or
Yes,
less. So
yes.
we need not do that again exercise for every building, every project. you
Okay.
mean to say, yeah.
Now, certain buildings, and in those certain buildings, I would not say include the buildings which are to be constructed. I would include mainly those buildings which are, say, heritage buildings. Now, say President House. Now, if you have to provide the fire protection arrangements, it cannot comply with the requirements of the NBC. Now, what to do then? Then have the performance-based design. Now, everything is fixed in the President House. you know every scenario, and then this performance-based design approach would be a better option than, say, looking for a solution from the code, National Building Code, which would require many structural changes. Now, this is the problem that we faced. Say, now I can say if something is to be purchased from the market and provided at the site and meets the requirement, well and good. But 80% of the fire protection and fire prevention is structural in nature. So they are to be addressed before the building, say, is started for construction.
Correct.
And now the buildings which have already been constructed, the existing buildings and monumental buildings where structural changes cannot be made. And then you have to find a solution for the fire problems in those areas. So you-
Correct, sir, but is this softwares and other things will not help you in that case? Because that may probably give you a better direction rather than somebody's analysis and,
Say
es-
now if I do the designing using the softwares, they are also going to tell me that if you install a sprinkler system, that is the suggestion by the performance-based designer.
Correct.
And certified by the third party. Now, I cannot put the sprinkler system. That is the problem. You tell me that you provide detector. I can.
But whether those buildings will be safe later, that also is the
No,
most
no,
important
that-
thing.
say, that is the
we
point.
have to make them safe.
That is the point of discussion. Now, I cannot say heritage building means you cannot put a nail in the building. I am a member of the heritage committee for the Parliament House and other buildings in Delhi. So we did not allow even, say, putting a nail in the building. How can you install the detection system? So whether you do with the performance-based design or you do with the prescriptive code, you cannot put a pipe passing from one end to the other end of the building.
No, but how do we ensure about the fire safety in such a case?
Now
sir?
that is the question. Say, now if we assume that the performance-based design has solution for everything, we are sadly mistaken.
Sir, it is only a tool. Let me tell you.
It
I
is-
mean, it's a tool to analyze, and then find out. But we don't say it's a complete, because again, the input data is given by us by our experience. Let us understand that. It is not that complete. Yeah.
I have
So this is not the future.
No, I don't say it's the future.
I-
No.
This is not the
I don't
future.
say it's the future, but I say it's probably the tools which will be helpful in identifying and analyzing these kind of issues
now,
and problems.
Can I just comment on
Yeah,
on
please,
the tools?
please,
I did
yeah.
actually say the tools should be used by an expert.
Tools should be used by
Like
an
this man here, he's an expert in CFD.
Correct.
Okay? He understands how CFD works.
Absolutely.
You can't just have anyone using these tools because they know the limitations. You need to know your limitations, and that's why you have to be the expert to do it. And that's the problem. There's not enough experts out there. Prescriptive guidance is based on disasters. They're reactive to disasters. In the UK, we reacted to a disaster, and we've just changed all the law because of this disaster of Grenfell.
What can
Okay?
be done?
Yeah,
This
what
will-
we can be done. Whereas if you look at now, we are building tall buildings out of timber, but that's based on research. We spent nearly £500,000 on researching timber in fire and launched a guide. That's what you call, that's true engineering. So you understand what the behavior of that product is and how it performs. Regarding the 4 stages you were talking about, sir, you can't guarantee that with the performance base as well, because you are fixed. So you have to have some kind of way of monitoring and assessing the risk as the building changes over its lifetime. And we spoke about a risk assessment,
Yeah.
and we spoke about in the
Yesterday
UK,
we were
had
talking
the
about risk
ROO,
assessment.
and when people start making changes to the buildings, then someone needs to go in and say, you've made the change, now you need to risk assess, or you need to assess the hazard in your material or the hazard in your building, and then come up with a design and make the design changes if required.
Right.
That's what needs to be done. The monitoring of these buildings need to be monitored. Someone needs to do it. And the enforcing body, you need to have an enforcing body.
I understand. Right.
So sorry, I have to disagree with you.
I too have disagreements.
That's okay.
Now what has been said, that the prescriptive designs are based on the
I mean, experiences basically, and then what
no,
needs to
no,
be disasters and
it's other way around. Now, say, if say RSET and ASET he described in his case studies,
yeah.
where does that data come from based on which the software was developed?
Basically from the experience.
Oh, it's not experience only. Several fire tests, full-scale
That's
tests
right.
have been
Yeah.
conducted.
Research and yeah, that's
Okay.
what it's
And
done.
then the data was fetched from there.
Correct.
And this prescriptive code is time-tested code. Here the output is uncertain. You are not very sure because it has say you cannot create a fire and then see, he will say, okay, we will simulate. Now simulation parameters, if they differ, if they are not frozen, if they are not the same in the time of actual outbreak of fire, your design is going to fail. So that is the uncertainty with the performance-based design. Whereas prescriptive code, where do we lack? Now say reading the National Building Code of India is a problem. Now that code has prescribed the minimum requirements. Now what is expected out of the designer? That you do the calculations, which is also the engineering, and if the results are less than certain parameters which have been described, the minimum parameters, then you take the minimum values, otherwise the calculators values will proceed. So my take on this prescriptive code is that if you go by the minimum as the optimum, then the entire problem comes in. If you are calculating it, then in that case, the prescriptive designs are as good as the designs which have been, driven out from the fire performance-based designs.
Thank you, sir. Point is taken. But only thing is, in the present code, we have issues like this kind of buildings or warehouses because, the code talks about the compartmentation and certain things. Sometimes it poses a challenge. So that is where, especially airport,
add
you
one
take
line?
care.
Sir, just
The implementation challenge.
add to that. Now, in this building, one observation was made that the sprinkler is at a height of 20
20
meters.
meters, yeah.
Now, sprinkler heads are available which work from the 20-meter height.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that problem is taken care. Now, second aspect which is being talked about is the compartmentation. Now, compartmentation does not mean the physical barrier. Now, the National Building Code, if you read the definition of the fire barrier, it includes, say, the fire resisting wall, it includes the fire curtains.
Yeah.
So, if
Fire
you,
curtains and smoke
if you-
ventilation, all these things have been specified.
So
I
if you
agree.
have to provide, say, compartmentation to these premises, is not necessarily that by erecting the wall, fire-resistant wall, you make the compartmentation. Put the fire curtains. They will come down in the event of a fire.
Right.
So now reading the code is also required, is equally important when you make implementation or make a decision as to whether this would be a performance-based design or
Yeah.
the prescriptive code design.
Yeah, Mr. You want to say something?
So actually only one line to what just you just said, sir, that I totally agree with you that the current standards are very good. They are written in a very good faith with data, research and everything. But if we don't have a fire strategy and if we don't say that what we have done, then the other stakeholders on the project, contractor, subcontractor, vendor, client, operator, future people, how they will know what you have done. So
No, fire
that's the
strategy is one thing
documentation.
which needs
This,
to be made.
this
There is no-
point is well taken.
Well, yeah, that's correct.
So the prescriptive code design, you can validate it by using these softwares.
You can do that.
So
You can
this
do
is the validation process. Instead of the basic
Design.
it is validation. So why
So
should
we'll
we
call it
say
as
that
performance-based validation, sir, rather instead of design. At least that is the first step for us to move towards that.
only validation?
Yeah, I am coming back to you only.
Yeah.
If you want to make a comment on this, the next question is to you.
Yeah, what I feel is that there are 4 things that I see what a performance design is. One is, do you want to optimize on the fire safety cost? That's fundamental. As you said, The structural building which required a performance, a prescriptive design of BS 9999 which says 2 hours, and they did a performance design and they brought it down to 90 minutes. That's one part. So optimizing of cost of a fire safety. Second is, the second point, most important point is whether you want to increase the design flexibility. Do you want to give a flexibility to the designer to do a design for, if in case it is on a performance-based design. That's the second advantage of performance design. Third is, are you addressing any voids in the existing codes? Okay? Is there a void in the existing code that's been addressed by a performance-based design? And fourth is, are you open to accept the latest CFDs and the analysis that's been developed hardcore? And there are so many CFD analysis that people work on. You have ASET, you have ASET, you have Lavent, you have Lavent for ventilation, you have ASET for calculation, you have FDS, Fire Dynamic Simulator. In fact, Fire Dynamic Simulator also has a tool which is the FPE tool, if you guys are aware. The FPE tool wherein you can add a sprinkler and you can activate the sprinkler if you give the right inputs to it.
That's
the RTI, the response time, So are you embracing the new technologies in terms of the tools that we are going to get?
No, the tools, whatever
that's
you
what
said.
I feel is one.
Meeting the minimum requirements, that is what sir is talking about. Meeting the minimum requirements, you can validate. If somewhere, some lapses are there, that always can be plugged in. So that is the thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, at the end of the day,
It has opened up a lot of discussion.
this has, yeah. I haven't got anything against
Become very lively,
the
yeah.
prescriptive guidance. I use it all the time. But there are areas that we do need to think to enable the building, the design. How do we get over that? And that's where you start using the performance, or the fire engineering, I like to call it, rather than performance-based. That's the areas where there's no answers in the codes or anything. So you have to use something to actually validate your design. And that's where the CFD comes in, the structural modeling comes in. Regarding reducing the fire protection from 90 to 60 or 120 to, the idea of the time equivalence is you still meet the design intent. The building will still remain up for 120 minutes, even with 90 minutes of protection. That's what it demonstrates at the end of the day. Yeah, so that's where you need to think where you can't actually substantiate or give the answer using the codes. Then something is, we've got to have something else, and that's the fire engineering. Yeah, and that's where I'm saying I've got nothing against codes. I've been using them all my life. The day I was born.
Right. Thank you for that, sir. Perhaps, sir, I just wanted to ask you, as a fire officer, whether you get this kind of proposals probably, so how do you react for them, or what is your take on such?
Thank you very much, first of all. First of all, whatever the requirements we give initially is only because of the active measures and passive measures which we give on the initial stages.
Yeah.
When the building permissions are coming at the initial stage, it's basically as sir has already told you, it's a minimum requirement which we give, and there are a lot of changes. Many times occupancies are changing. When the actual occupation happens, that time the occupant load has increased, which was expected. Even it is more than that, the occupant load. In certain cases, such cases, we expect that the occupant should come across and bring some novel ideas about how to protect the building, which is not happening in Mumbai or any other part of India.
Yeah.
So that if they come across with the validations, or if they come across with the new ideas, surely we can accept it, provided they give the proper.
And meeting the minimum requirements of the code, of course. That is because it's
be fulfilled, because that is always based on the research and a lot of calculations being done.
So, Vinod, so how do you assess the risk, in this kind of different kind of occupancies? See, one thing is we talked about the fire performance-based design or validation, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But before that, general kind of buildings like normal residential or something, they have fixed kind of requirements and everything. So you are also working on different kind of warehouses, and so what are the risks and how do you handle those challenges?
Yeah,
I'll tell you, in one of the projects, we can't meet the travel distance at all. You see, 30 or 45 meters, because such a huge facility where they don't want to provide. In fact, that is the challenge. So like this, I am also sure you also would have faced.
Basically, as you rightly said, we did a warehouse in Kolkata, which was 300 meters by 300 meters. Now, for a 300 meters by 300 meter square block, meeting the travel distance criteria of 45 meters, which is same for this. NBC has been a little conservative in giving these numbers for a sprinkler building as well. So there we had a big challenge in achieving that. So what we did there is we created the fire exits in the
Staircase
middle,
and a tunnel,
in the middle and the tunnel, and we used smoke pressurization system in the staircase, and at every 100 meters to ensure that it reaches the corner within 45 meters, and then we did the tunnel. In such areas, if the local authorities allow us to use tools and do a performance-based design, that will help. The only challenge in doing a performance-based design is that you need to set your goal, you need to set your objective, you need to set the design fire scenarios. What all fires? There are about 8 fire scenarios described in national NFPA. I'm an NFPA person, so not UK, but NFPA. If you look at SFP Handbook for Fire Performance Design, if you look at NFPA 101, they have defined the prescribed fire scenarios, 8 fire scenarios, if I remember it right. And based on that fire scenarios, every fire scenario, whatever is possible, hardly possible in that particular building, that you need to do. You need to design a safeguard against if something of this is extra. So there are provisions which are given, as Mishra Sahab was also raising his concern in that case. I really respect that. But there are also safeguards to be given. If this doesn't function, what's the next safeguard that you have? So there are provisions in the SFP Handbook of Fire Protection. There are provisions in NFPA 101 as well as Fire Protection Handbook, where they have given the entire design scenario. They have given a total chart from where to start and where to end. There is a requirement of a verification of design by a third party. There is a requirement of trial design to be approved. So there is a process, and I believe if the process is followed, and the new tools that are coming in, as I said, FDS is there, and we use the tools appropriately. But rightly said by Dhaval, you need an expert to do that, and you need an expert to validate that, and you need an expert from the government committee to understand that and approve it. Finally, prescriptive, at least the consultant fraternity or the person architect is safe to say that yes, I have 100% followed National Building Code, and if something happens, yes, I'm okay. But if you do a performance-based design, the biggest question is who is accountable finally if something goes wrong. So that's the designer is accountable. Yeah. So it's a sort of risk in terms of design. Nevertheless, going forward, so places where a prescriptive cannot be applied, I think.
No, but I like this idea, whatever Dr. Mishra Sahab is given. I don't want to call it as a design, maybe a validation to start with. I think that is where we can start with, and then probably we can see how that can be improvised, if at all it is.
Absolutely.
That's a good idea.
Absolutely.
Mr. Jiju, I would like to come to you. You have a lot of experience in the fire alarm systems and then active systems and other things. So how do you look at, integrating these systems in case of any kind of performance-based design or something?
Yeah, thank you FSI for having me here. First of all, good evening one and all. So now that we are talking a lot about performance-based design, let me just quickly re-emphasize on the prime objective of performance-based design, right? In order to protect property or life or process. So that's what we were talking about all this while. Today, if you see, the technology is revolving around 4 major key elements. That's first detect, and then comes alert, detect at the right stage, and then comes alert the occupants, irrespective of the type of the buildings, and then comes evacuation, right? So to have a right system to evacuate the occupants. And then last but not least, so this is basically for the life safety, and then last but not least would be to suppression to protect the building or maybe property as well in order to continue the process. Again, if you see, talking about, let's say, the performance-based design, that's something which is widely used in the buildings wherein you have environmental challenges. Now, challenges could be such that your air velocity could be quite high, more than perhaps 4,000 FPM and things like that, where your ventilation system itself is designed in a way that you must have, air CFM per square feet. And then again, if your building geometry itself is such that wherein you have 20-meter height building, the way Sir told about, maybe the warehouses wherein you have maybe 15 meter or 20 meter height buildings and things like that, wherein you cannot deploy the passive detection system. Or it could be related to, let's say, the stratification effect as well. Like in basis the kind of insulation that we have in the building, you could have the stratification effect as well, wherein you cannot deploy the normal passive devices. So that's where the performance-based design is something which is applicable. I'm talking from the life safety standpoint, right? Again, basis that we define. Like, again, if you see in today's scenario, we focus a lot on two signatures of fire. One would be smoke, which is majorly smoke, and then comes your heat. Now, if you see of late, the guideline is also evolving a lot. Like irrespective of, let's say, NFPA or maybe EN or VDS or LPCB, there is no dearth out there. We have plethora of codes and standards, and again, it varies from vertical to vertical. Perhaps for the data center, your air velocity would be, let's say, 160 CFM to remove 1 kilowatt of heat from the server. Same way, if you talk about the warehouse, the challenges would be different. Again, you have to do the class of commodity, right? Class A to class D. NFPA also talks about class A being highest hazard and class D being the moderate hazard. Basis that, class of commodity is being done. Now, basis that, when you have, let's say, a comprehensive solution wherein you have active devices as well and passive devices as well. Again, in passive device, today the technology is talking about going beyond the two signatures that we are talking about, right? Say smoke or heat. We have, other signatures like flame, or maybe it could be, let's say, carbon monoxide, or it could be, let's say, the LPG detectors or off gas, stage. Mr. Danjal also talked about off gas wherever we have lithium ion batteries, maybe battery energy storage system application. Right, so we have different types of devices to detect fire, or rather I would say to accelerate detection. I mean, you have the combination of, let's say, active and passive device, like I said, for the high or stall structures, or maybe where the wire height is more than, let's say, 10 meter or 15 meter, you can have, let's say, the active device. And again, so there are different types of arrangements could be done. It's also important to have a proper integration with the main life safety system. When I talk about the tall buildings, it's expected that the same system shall be responsible for detection, alert, evacuation, and even suppression activity. We also have, perhaps sir also can correct me, let's say we also have a requirement of, let's say, an integrated talkback system as well. Now, when the system is expected to perform, different operations, to meet the requirement of life safety, again, if you refer, let's say, NFPA guideline chapter 17, there is a new clause number 17.6.4, if I'm right, which talks about integrating all the initiating devices, or rather the input devices, in order to maintain, it shall be supervised in order to maintain the integrity of 3 points: data, voice, and power, right? So to have the complete, efficient, or rather the most invincible system. Yep, so there is no limitation as
Yeah,
such.
wonderful.
One important point is that the performance-based design, if you look at specifically NFPA, it says that it is not applicable to an occupancy together. It is applicable to a specific room, for example, in a building. It's not that you apply performance design for an entire building. NFPA says it is applicable to a specific. It's not for a generic occupancy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So some kind of special occupancies or which are not
in this
addressed
entire
by the
building,
code.
if this particular room is
I agree.
it's not
See,
following.
even Dr. Munrazulu was talking about some kind of, the mixed occupancy kind of scenarios where there has to be some kind of optimization, then that may help probably. I just wanted to ask you, I think we are short of time. Unfortunately, but
We're
I
never
wanted
short
to
of time.
ask the audience actually, get them involved with any questions and other things. But before that, I just would like to ask one question to Mr. Rao, and then Sir also can conclude. You see, you have been working in UK or in India as well. You're also in charge and you've been doing projects. Do you think our buildings are unsafe because we are following prescriptive? I'm sure we don't have any issues or anything so far.
Let's get this right. The NFPA code, or the Indian Building National Code. I worked with the Indian Building National Code when it used to follow the British codes or the British standards, when it was post-war building studies. That's what they followed. But when they moved on to the NFPA platform, shall I say, I think the code is a lot better. There's a lot more there.
It's a lot more than?
It's a lot better.
Lot better.
Yeah,
Oh,
than
wonderful.
where it was. Yeah. I know it saves time up, but one thing I do want to say.
Yeah, these are all the
is-
people, who have worked on the
One
code.
thing I do want to say, we can get the design right, but the build quality globally as a world, the build quality is so poor, it's unreal. unreal.
No, that
That
we
is a
agree.
big issue.
We-
That's
we
one
will-
thing we haven't covered, but that is
True.
a big issue.
True, true. I'm
Thank you.
really happy. My day is made. I mean, our codes, whatever it is there, they are better. So this is, sir, you want to say something?
Just one thing I want to add. Where would this performance-based design be useful? Now, as authority, I am explaining this thing. Now, when you get a plan, say you mentioned about the travel distance or the width of the staircase or
Staircase,
of the door.
Number of
Right.
staircase, yeah.
So now if the authority wants to relax something, now there is, say, discretion has been provided in the National Building Code and also in the fire laws that they can relax. But for certain reasons, the authorities are not exercising those discretions.
Correct. You're right.
Now, before them, the problem is if something goes wrong and the file is opened, then the question would be raised that why did you allow this relaxation?
True.
Based on what?
Correct.
So this performance-based design or the tools which are used therein can be utilized
Yeah.
for justifying the relaxation which is being granted
Yes.
by the authority.
That's a good point, sir. That's a very good point. I
Another
think,
issue
yeah.
is, say, if I ask anybody, say any client or any builder or architect to get the say building all these analysis done, FDS and CFD analysis done, he'll say it will cost me a hull.
Yeah.
So now, moment he is seeking any relaxation, say if he wants to make, say, travel distance from 45 to 55, you tell him you get this thing done, he will not raise his voice, he'll go and get it done and come back to you, look, the 55 also satisfies the requirement. So authority will have the arguments which would be, say, useful in the court of law or before the inquiry commissions and the anti-corruption or the CBI, that look, I granted this exception or
Based
this
on this
relaxation
validation.
based on this. So that is
Justification.
why I said ki validation and say relaxation or exception to the prescribed norms, this would be a better tool.
Wonderful idea, sir. I think that is a good point. I think we should look forward for that. Yeah, please, Mr. Padmanathan.
Hello, I am Padmanathan. Yeah, yeah. No, I will tell the. Actually, here, particularly, I am Padmanathan from L&T Construction. I am heading the fire engineering division. So, luckily, this panel is a entirely different, mixer, and I am really enjoy last, around 1 hour time. Here, just I am telling 18 years before, I am just going back when the dial project happened. So I have gone with Mr. Jish Misra ji, and that time around 35 years old boy. Okay, I gone and challenged something, and as a person, as a fire officer, first he listened properly what I am telling, and he told. Actually, he pointed out. He actually missed one point. I just emphasized that. Immediately what he told, whatever you are telling, I am accepting. But you come with the proper fire strategy report. This project is the prestigious project for nation. And we want to do it in an international standard. Whatever you are telling, NBC versus NFP, all this thing, by subject I am accepting. But you make a report. 2 times, 3 times, he screwed me left and right around 2 months' time. 3 sittings, I have elaborated the report, gone with him. He personally interacted with his team of people, argued with me, openly accepted for argument. And finally, that 40-page report I have made, finally, after 2 months' time, lot of performance-based design I have included in that. And the first time that CFD analysis, all these things, everything it has accepted. And he took a proper record for the submission. And based on that report, he gave approval. And this is the example now that 20 years, 18 years over. What I am telling here, that my second point I will tell you, same thing for Warwick Saab or who are all the distinguished fire officers are sitting, who is knowledgeable. If you are explaining, as it is the responsibility of the consultant, we have to go and demonstrate, we have to tell in a polite manner why we are telling, what is the reason, everything.
Sir, we appreciate your thing, but I want to know any question from your
No,
side.
no,
Here,
here,
because, we are running short of time. There are some
here
questions.
question, what is the question? More than a
Yeah,
question,
sir has got a flight also.
more than a question, it's a solution.
Yeah.
What I am telling, this whatever the performance, even now that NBC 2016, if you will see very thoroughly, if you are seeing, they are encouraging the performance-based design.
I know.
Nowhere code is telling don't go for a performance design. Only thing, you have to come with a proper record while submission and get stamped, and after that you go as per the requirement. Then it will not be a problem. And definitely in future, in India, we are going in a different direction. We can't do a monotonous projects and all. Every project, it is a complicated, different type. You can't make your code.
Accepted, sir.
Okay,
Accepted.
so only suggestion, fire strategy report you prepare as a consultant, as a fire engineer,
We'll do
and
our
you
job,
submit
sir.
and get the approval. That's all.
Sure, sir. Thank you. Next one, please.
Can
Yes,
I have
sir.
one
Yeah.
very small question? What are the references, maybe experts, for people like us? This is Ajit Garve, by the way. I'm from Johnson Controls. Our basic rule is 99% cookie cutter rule, and Annex should be for performance based in NFPA 72, which talks about design execution. What are the good resources for people like us, to read more about performance? Because beyond Annex B, I couldn't refer most of the documents. If you can just guide us on that as well.
No, you are talking about NFPA 72, which is specific to detection system.
Yeah.
So, performance-based design is not specific to one specific.
Yeah. So I'm talking in general. If I want to read about.
SFP Fire Protection Handbook for Performance-Based Design, correct? That's one good document. You can look at Chapter 5 of NFPA 101. That's one part, and you can look at 3.10 of Fire Protection Handbook NFPA 08. I think, and I have a list of documents which I can give you, but these three are basic fundamental documents we can use, because 3.1 of Fire Protection Handbook NFPA is hardly about 20 pages, so you'll understand the crux of design. They have given design scenarios, they have explained how to do it, and then you can look at NFPA 101 Chapter 5, entire Chapter 5. So
Right,
that should
thank
give you the answer.
Thank
Sure.
you, Vinod.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Thank you.
Quickly. Anyone else has got any questions? Yeah, here.
When we talk about performance codes, I'm Tak Matthews. I'm an elevator person. That's my background. 35 years in the industry, A17.1, EN, Indian standards, I'm all there. Despite which, I think I'm still learning about elevators.
I am too learning, my friend.
Everybody is learning that.
So we talked about performance-based, and there's one very underlying statement, underlying requirement etched in stone. Expert. Now, who decides who's expert? Because in today's context, I see everybody is an expert. Everybody knows everything.
So, as like I said in my talk this afternoon, we have over 300 fire engineers. All of them have a unique expertise behind them. They either have a structural background, some of them have a mechanical background, yeah. Some of them have a smoke dynamic background, and they either have PhDs in them, or they have engineering degrees. So the qualification in the UK, we thrive to become chartered engineers as a minimum. Okay, that's what determines what is an expert. Yeah. So that's where I would say it's the education, and I think as an industry, we need to produce more fire engineers. So we need to invest more time and money in the universities so they actually teach what fire engineering is, rather than just go generic and then go into fire engineering.
Right. Thank you, Rao. Anyone else, please? Yes, sir.
See, I'm Kamath. I'm one of the licensed agencies. See, my question is very simple. There is fire law in Maharashtra and we are to carry out as per the law. We are supposed to give Form A certificate after completion of work. Now, in that it is very clearly written that we are following NBC and as per that we have installed. The moment this comes, the performance guarantee based design, as Taxa said, okay, you are experts, but is this expertise acceptable to the fire department? Because ultimately, see, we are certifying, we are giving Form A, we are liable. Tomorrow we are liable as law.
True,
Something happens,
True.
there are only two persons. One
See,
is
that
one
is
is one is licensed agency, secondly fire officers.
That is what, sir, yesterday in the UL round table we were discussing about this. We need to have a registry of specified, this kind of experts to be identified. I think that process need to be done. Unfortunately, we don't have an engineer's bill in India. Engineers are not even recognized by the government of India.
On the contrary, I
so
suggest...
we have only architect's bill. Engineers, as an engineer,
Yes.
whatever I do, I don't have any responsibility actually, accountability as per the government. So we have been trying for that. Unfortunately, that also didn't happen. And so we need to have a registry definitely towards
I think
that.
that's a very
We
valid
are
point,
working.
Tak, and he is asking is that what I said is the authority should qualify a few companies who can do specific work in terms of approval, and you need to take that approval. For example, performance-based design. It's not one mechanical engineer's or one electrical engineer's job. It's a complete package which he has to know. He has to know all the international standards because there's no Indian standards on performance-based design. It's a complete package. So a company who has a structural engineer, who has an electrical engineer, who has a mechanical engineer, and as a company who can certify, I think if that particular qualification or companies who can be established and listed, then I think everybody has a solution to go to them and take their certification, because in NFPA 101 also and International Building Code, it's clearly specified that if the local authority having jurisdiction, that's what they use, doesn't have a resource to approve a performance-based design, they can appoint a third-party consulting firm who has their expertise and which can be dependable and signed. It's a specific note given in international standard. So I think that's going to come. India has been changing since last 10 years. We have seen a lot of changes, a lot of improvements. It's going to come.
Yeah, one good thing which I am noticing is, now IS and NBC, they are approachable for common person also. So we can always give the suggestions, everything, and these things are getting revised very fast. From 1983 to 2005, NBC took so many years. Now 2016, that also are getting revised. These revisions are becoming very fast. I think that's a very good sign.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
whatever
Not
the
only
suggestions
that,
are coming should be adopted very fast, so that then it becomes easier for us to adopt it and follow the rules.
Yeah.
That
And-
anyway,
and-
yesterday also this point was raised in the BIS discussion. I'm sure now I think the codes also have to be revised very frequently. I think after the next year, probably the technology is improving on, very fast, especially on some fronts like EV chargers and other things, which the other day one gentleman was talking about, an immediate necessity of an amendment even to the code. Otherwise, they don't know what to do. So that is the issue. Yeah, somebody else raised. I think that is the last question, please. We'll close with that.
Hello. Good evening, everybody. My question is simple. When we design even a performance system, it is been considered that it should be designed with the latest standard, latest edition of the standard. Say now it is 2022. But the material we are going to use, they say our approval is under process to meet the latest standard. So in performance-based system, whether this type of material will be approved and acceptable?
Materials, there is no such this one. Whatever the approval,
No.
for the material that can be used.
No, the performance-based design is nothing other than the prescriptive. You need to meet the objectives and goals of a prescriptive code only.
Say basically you need
How
to
you are
maintain
going to
the
do
tenable
it
condition.
is different. So it is more code based, not the material or the product based. It's more how do you design a system rather than what product you are using there.
My question is little more simple. I will make. We design as per latest code. We consider it was a performance code. But when we are buying material from any vendor for that, he said for this latest code amendment, because every code is amended, not a new code, basically. For that, we don't have any approval. Now, approval is Evil Estate FM approved. He said our approval is under process. In that case, whether authority or the end use client will accept that material or not.
Every code is prospective. The code cannot be
Whatever it is there in
retrospective.
vogue, that has to be
Has
meeting
to
the
be followed,
requirement.
so-
That's it. For that particular material. So thank you very much. Sir, your question. You can't put a question, sir. You are supposed to answer.
On the lighter note, now most competent authorities in the country under law, say competent to grant approval on the fire plants, they are incompetent. Okay. Now, when incompetent authorities are on the chair, how can you press a design which need expertise to the extent that is the challenge. And we took, say, 25 years to read the IS 15105, the sprinkler code.
You need to adopt a
25.
framework. That's what you need to do. You need to adopt a framework. You need to get together and agree a framework so you can start using prescriptive or fire engineering in this country. That's what you need to do.
So,
It's the same problem in Saudi Arabia at the moment. So they are running with like mega projects everywhere in the country of Saudi Arabia. And the local authority, I won't use the word incompetent, but not capable of with the pace of construction happening at the moment. So what they have done, the framework, they have appointed or granted license to some specialized fire consultant. They can do a review, approve, and stamp on their behalf, but they will still tell the authority that we are approving on your behalf, this is the project. And if the authority has a specific question, they would ask for a separate review. And separate review, yes.
so in that case, the responsibility or the accountability lies with
stamping
the
company.
Stamping company.
Yes.
So we make a provision in the law that in case the performance design is being followed,
but
then certified by the agency, and that
Exactly.
agency will be held accountable
Exactly.
for anything.
But before that happen, that report or the design should come from the consultant who has the credential to do those kind of design. So they are the first liable people. They made the design. Usually on the simple project, the process is that you as a consultant, you go to those approving authority and get a stamp. But on a complex project, you have to appoint another third-party reviewer. So now imagine, I am a designer, he is a reviewer, you are stamping on his behalf. So now we are all in the same boat. We are sharing responsibility. All. Anyone signing on the document has the same liability.
Say in the government parlance, what is the fact? Moment you sign or counter-sign a document,
Yeah.
and the authority who counter-signs is equally accountable. And criminal liability.
Yes,
This is a
criminal. It is criminal liability. It is criminal liability. For Grenfell,
No consultant is prepared to take that criminal liability. That is the problem.
Not only, we're not talking about only fire safety designs, talk about structural designs
Yeah.
of the buildings. Do
Same.
you think our urban local bodies are capable of certifying those structural designs? They don't have that expertise. They go to, they have put a condition that you need to get an approval for any tall building in the country. They need to go to IIT or, some other agency and get their approval. And then whoever is the designer, it is his responsibility to get the designs approved. Same way, why don't we do that?
Mishraji,
See,
this-
we can identify maybe IITs or IAS. There are a lot of education institutions, very high-end education institutions. Yeah.
Not direct. Say statutory obligation is the statutory accountability.
Sir,
Say if
but
the architect takes the help of a structural engineer, the basically first person who would be tried in the court of law would be the architect. Just listen. And then architect would say, since this is not my domain of knowledge or expertise, I took the consultancy from XYZ, who say for the structural purposes, HVAC and all that. these persons being competent under the law, they have certified. So I should be absolved, and the entire criminal liability should be imposed on the person for which the structure has failed. Okay, so fireman, it is only the fire authority. There is nobody who is signing on his behalf and who is competent under law. The third party, that kind of, say, so legal framework has to be reviewed. That is one challenge. And second challenge is that you need expertise for, at the present, the country is not prepared to,
And
have this.
secondly, in every performance design, you have a designer and a third-party reviewer as per
right.
any code. Saudi Arabia can do it because they have a golden tap and a golden commode, but India cannot afford so many
So many people.
so many stages and everybody having a
And everybody may become a signing authority
everybody
also.
a
So
sounding
that there
authority.
also there may be certain issues.
And practical
Anyway,
and-
thank you very much, everybody. It's a wonderful panel.